vehicle of your dreams and enjoy. Exclusive valet service, complimentary drop-off and pickup for any of your service needs. 50 service loaners available for your convenience. Our Mercedes-Benz certified technicians will preserve your vehicle for years to come.
We heard from, some have mentioned on social media, public speaking is apparently not one of the characteristics required for a job in the U.S. Senate. While this was going on, the first details are emerging from a widely anticipated book, the product of Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward, of course, one half of Woodward and Bernstein, brought us Watergate, among other things. Bob Woodward, who maintains a title at the Washington Post. And this piece of work by our friends Phil Rucker and Robert Costa hit while we were on the air. Bob Woodward's new book reveals a nervous breakdown of Trump's presidency. So who better to talk to but their national political correspondent Robert Costa, also happens to be host of Washington Week on PBS. Bob, I know it's a lot, and I know it's a piece of work you've been able to read and subsume, but walk us through what you believe will be the headlines when this book lands and is read by everybody.
Woodward uses the phrase nervous breakdown. He talks about an administrative coup d'etat. The book is full of scenes, vivid scenes, about top advisors to President Trump plucking papers off of his desk, trade agreements, foreign policy decisions, to try to keep the president away from making decisions they find alarming him, with documents, dates, calendars.
Assassination of Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and it's quickly and completely ignored by his defense secretary.
You have the president telling Mattis and other defense officials, go after Assad in Syria, kill him, an assassination order in a sense, and Mattis saying we're not going to do that. There's another scene with Mattis talking to the president about the late Senator John McCain, who was then alive. The president, according to Woodward's account, says McCain was a coward and accepted early release from Vietnam. Mattis corrects him and says that is incorrect, sir, and the president kind of brushes off that response. These scenes are just full all over the book about people having these kind of exchanges with the president, and it's all based on Woodward's reporting at this time.
Also, you mentioned this, between what the president calls employees of his, members of his administration, and what those around the president call him, you kind of have to keep reminding yourself this is the president of the United States and the West Wing and cabinet we're talking about here.
It is a bleak portrait provided by Bob Woodward. You see an administration that's struggling to contain and guide their own president, reluctant to say anything publicly, but privately going so far as to take trade agreements off of his desk, to pull back on some of his foreign policy missions. They're trying to teach him about world affairs. There's a scene inside of the Pentagon where they try to take the president around the world, and the whole scene falls apart as the generals and others in the military fail to convince the president about world order and about U.S. alliances abroad. And you see a president isolated, a president who's also fuming constantly about the Russia investigation, scenes with his former attorney John Dowd, with the president saying, I really don't want to testify after going through an arduous practice session, and the president continues to say publicly he wants to testify. And so these scenes cut at the core of what some of the president has said publicly, and he has yet to respond, but knowing the president, he surely will.
Robert Costa from the newsroom of the Washington Post, as everyone reacts to the reporting inside this new book by Bob Woodward, who has confirmed to NBC News all of the substance and on-the-record quotes contained in this Washington Post piece. Kristen Welker over at the White House, an interesting place to be, I would assume, today. Kristen?
It is, Brian, and no response yet from White House officials. Let me paint the scene for you here. At last check, a number of officials were huddled in the office of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. That was before this bombshell came out. Now, were they discussing the hearings on Capitol Hill? Was it a pre-planned meeting? We don't know. As you know from your time covering the White House, there are often meetings here throughout the day. One thing is certain, they had their eyes trained on those fireworks on Capitol Hill, and now on these bombshell revelations. They surely knew that this book, that these excerpts were going to come out. They are undoubtedly trying to craft their response. So I expect we will get something from them in short order, if not a presidential tweet. What is so striking to me, Brian, though, about these excerpts that we've read so far in Bob Woodward's book is that to some extent they sort of connect the dots of so much of the reporting that we have done here since the first days of this administration. The tone and the tenor really echo the discord and at times chaos that we witnessed here. Remember, NBC News reported that John Kelly referred to the president as an idiot several months ago. We also reported that his Secretary of State referred to him as a moron. And then some months after that, of course, we saw the ouster of his first Secretary of State. So it's wholly consistent with, I think, so much of our reporting, and specifically surrounding the idea of a presidential interview. In conversations with the president's attorney, they have been very concerned about him sitting down with special counsel Robert Mueller for this very reason, out of concern that he might perjure himself. And what we see in Woodward's book is really a further exploration as to why they have so many concerns. And I want to go back to a point that you just raised. Will we see some wholesale purge here at the White House? My money, Brian, is that we won't likely see a purge. Will we see some departures? That is certainly possible. But this president seems to, in his second year, really want to project an air of stability beyond that initial chaos that we all witnessed. And I point you to his chief of staff, John Kelly. Not only is he still here, but the White House recently announcing that he plans to stay through the end of the term. So that is significant. It's a significant development. And I think that it shows this president is loath to sort of cut people off. Is he going to sideline his chief of staff? Has he already done that? By all accounts, he has. Will that happen to some of the people who've been quoted in this book? That is very possible. So we'll be tracking all of that. Still no briefing on this schedule, Brian. The president has an event at 1:30. We're hoping they open that up to reporters so we can ask them a few questions.
Kristen, I also wanted to share with you and members of our audience a piece of audio. Bob Woodward, well known for his reporter's methodology for keeping copious notes and, wherever possible, recordings of interviews. The following is when he was able to reach the president by phone late in the process. The book presumably had already gone to editors and maybe even publishers. He reaches the president in this snippet, and they talk about, in effect, why didn't you call me before this? We'll play it, talk about it on the other side.
I take it very seriously. I've done books on 8 presidents going back from Nixon to Obama.
Right.
And I learned something about reporting, frankly, Mr. President.
Good.
I've got to go talk to people and see them outside of the White House and outside of their offices, and gained a lot of insight and documentation. And it's a tough look at the world and your administration.
The White House that was in crisis and that was trying to have a better grip on its communications. We don't know that yet, but again, we're hoping we get to ask the president later on today, Brian.
As we say, more interesting day than usual, and an already interesting White House. Kristen Welker on the North Lawn for us. Kristen, thanks. Andrea Mitchell's been listening to this conversation and reading up on what's known about the book. Andrea, just knowing about human nature, one thing this would allow the president to do is say, no one called me, no one asked me for comment. I would have told a much different story than is portrayed in this book.
But on that audio tape that was released, there's an additional part of that transcript that's released where, by the way, Bob Woodward asked for permission, told the president he was recording him, and the president said, yes, that's fine. He has Kellyanne Conway come into the room and pick up the phone and join the conversation, and Bob says to Kellyanne Conway, you know, I asked you, and she does confirm, and yes, that request to talk to the president was rejected. Then the president says, well, why didn't you ask Hope Hicks? Why didn't you ask so-and-so? You know, he's deflecting it as much as he can. It is an extraordinary conversation that is revealed there, as you and Kristen were just describing. I wonder how the president retains John Kelly after the quotes, where he's quoted here as saying he's off the rails, he's crazy, he's an idiot. And these are direct quotes that Woodward has memorialized from others who were in the room. The incident on Assad and the threat to assassinate Assad, or the order to Defense Secretary Mattis, was back when there was that chemical attack. So there were a number of these instances. There's one involving the Joint Chiefs Chairman Joe Dunford, on whether or not they should go and strike North Korea. So you've got some really important foreign policy implications here. And Gary Cohn, the economic advisor, taking documents off the president's desk so he would not be signing those documents to get out of trade deals.
And Andrea, there's an aspect to today's hearing that we should give voice to. It's hard to define. You can kind of feel it in the air, and that is, among the Democrats, almost an effort to appeal to the public. They probably wish to appeal to constituents in the states where these Republican senators represent. Almost a foot race, concurrent with the damage racking up and charges racking up against this White House.
Absolutely. You're talking about the so-called red states, West Virginia and Indiana and North Dakota. You're talking about Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, and, of course, Joe Donnelly in Indiana. Those three senators under enormous pressure to vote with President Trump. He won West Virginia by a bigger margin than any other state. And Joe Manchin is popular, a former governor, but that is a lot of pressure. Also, of course, the Republican senators, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who might be wavering because of women concerned about the Roe v. Wade issue. But there's also, I think, an effort to gin up the Democratic base, because Democratic voters have not been as concerned in voting over Supreme Court issues as have the Republican base, the evangelicals. And it's always been a better issue for Republicans in midterm elections and in presidential election years. And I think it's an alarm bell to try to tell Democrats, this is a generational decision. Pay attention.
Andrea Mitchell in Washington. We note the local time is 1:14 Eastern Time. We note that Chairman Grassley has decided, well, I may be the only member of this committee to sit down, but I'm sure as heck going to sit down. So he's seated. The rest of the room has yet to fill in. We're going to take one final break. We won't miss a moment of the resumption of this hearing. Our live coverage continues on the other side.
Wherever forces clash,
some incoming rounds have been whistling past.
wherever leaders assert their power,
They not only stood next to each other, they stood up for each other.
our journalists will be there, bringing the world into focus.
If you have psoriasis, little things can be a big deal. That's why there's Otezla. Otezla is not a cream. It's a pill that treats moderate to severe plaque psoriasis differently. With Otezla, 75% clearer skin is achievable. Don't use if you're allergic to Otezla. It may cause severe diarrhea, nausea, or vomiting. Otezla is associated with an increased risk of depression. Tell your doctor if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts, or if these feelings develop. Some people taking Otezla reported weight loss. Your doctor should monitor your weight and may stop treatment. Upper respiratory tract infection and headache may occur. Tell your doctor about your medicines and if you're pregnant or planning to be. Otezla, show more of you.
Welcome to the place where people go to learn about their Medicare options before they're on Medicare.
Come on in. You're turning 65 soon? Yeah. And you're retiring at 67?
That's the plan. It's also a great time to learn about an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company. Here's why. Medicare Part B doesn't pay for everything.
This part is up to you.
A Medicare Supplement Plan helps pay for some of what Medicare doesn't. Call United Healthcare Insurance Company today to request this free decision guide and learn about the only Medicare supplement plans endorsed by AARP, selected for meeting their high standards of quality and service. This type of plan lets you say yes to any doctor or hospital that accepts Medicare patients.
Do you accept Medicare patients? I sure do.
So call United Healthcare today and ask for your free decision guide.
Oh, and happy birthday or retirement in advance.
In an era of online retail where everything is just a few clicks away, buying a car should be no different. That's why at Carvana, you can buy a car 100% online. We made it easy to browse, view, and buy from over 10,000 cars. You can even trade in your old car, all while binge watching your favorite TV show. Afterwards, we'll deliver your car to you, or you can pick it up from one of our car vending machines. Either way, your car comes with a 7-day return policy. So grab a seat, relax in your comfy pants, and enjoy the new way to buy a car at Carvana. This is Casper, the company bringing bedtime back to millions of happy sleepers. Try America's #1 rated mattress brand for 100 nights, risk-free. Unbox better sleep at Casper.com.
I always wanted to speak French, but I never had the time. And then I tried Babbel.
Babbel, the quick way to get conversational in a new language.
Oh, Democratic